I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, March 19th, 2019. First of all, is there anyone here to speak to anything that is not on the agenda tonight? All right. Moving right along. Actually, I want to do the minutes, but I think there's been a request on the Fox Run Road acceptance, the second new business item, to move that to the top. We have someone who I think can talk about that won't be able to, so I'll do that. But let's do the planning board minutes and the A&R first, if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So planning board minutes from March 5th, 2019. Everybody have a chance to look at those?
Yep. I did. I saw no changes. I motion rather to approve the minutes from March 5th.
I have a quick question before we second.
Yep.
This is just for my own, on page 4, there's a question mark, waiver of subdivision 7018-9, question mark, appendix F, is that?
I had the same question, but I recused myself from that, so I didn't know if that was something everyone else would know.
Is there a reason for the question mark?
It was probably a section, like a number that I missed hearing.
It came quickly and you just, okay.
Which one is it?
Do we know what it is?
Is that
For
this here?
second bullet down on page 4, yeah. Yep. Is it something we can just fix quickly? Do you know?
Yep. No. Let's see. Experimenting with all this new technology and it's not working very well.
I probably have it here.
Page 4.
Page
It's
4,
page
second bullet
4.
down. Waiver of subdivision 7018-9, and then parentheses.
Appendix
question mark,
F.
Appendix F.
Okay.
Just wonder what the question mark is for. Just wanted to clarify that for the minutes. Otherwise, I'm okay.
I'm sure it's in the subdivision bylaws.
Which I didn't bring with me.
I didn't either. That's good work.
So could you make a motion with that item being clarified?
Yeah.
Okay.
I rescind my motion and I make a new motion to approve the minutes from March 5th, 2019 with the clarification of the number for the waiver of subdivision on page 4, second bullet.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, Chet?
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Moving right along, we have an A&R, Donald Sykowski, 2 new building lots on south side of Pomeroy Street. Want to quickly explain to us what we're doing? Other plans
get this
back
for
here?
You want me to say something or what?
If you could just get on the microphone and give us a quick rundown on what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it wrong.
Okay, yeah, you don't have to get up there if you want to just give us a quick, or maybe Jeff, you can, don't get up done.
All right. Chairs are just too low, that's all.
My problem.
That's all right. We got time done.
Good evening, Donald Sykowski, 86 Pomeroy Street. Lifelong resident of Easthampton. I want to sell 2 lots on Pomeroy Street. The land has been in the property over 50 years, and it's all zoned for it. There should be no problem.
So you're splitting these 2 lots, or 1 lot into 2 here, is that right? Or is it actually 3 lots that you're splitting?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Looks like there's sufficient frontage. Any issues with the planning department?
No.
Any questions, comments from anybody on the board?
No.
All right.
Straightforward.
I move to endorse the A&R for Donald Sykowski for Pomeroy Street, lots 9, 10.
Second.
Is that the third one?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll sign these for you right now.
I don't know if that's black.
What, does he need them to go home?
Do we want
Jeff,
to hang on
do
to
you
them till we're
wanna-
signed up?
Does he want the copies?
Yeah, Jeff's going to get them.
Just stay 1 minute. We'll give you the signed copy. Take it with you.
Okay.
Come back around. Just, I like this guy. There you go. There it is, right there. 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for your patience. All right, so as I said, we can jump ahead to the review and request for recommendation to City Council regarding Fox Run Road acceptance. Is there someone here to speak to that? Hi.
Hi, Amanda Zadonis Kemp. I'm an attorney here in Easthampton, and I'm here on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Wunderlich. So we have been working on getting Fox Run accepted as a public street. We had some delays because there were some repairs that needed to be done that they were unable to get done until recently. So we are now in the final phases of it. I know there had been, when Jess was still the city planner, there had been some questions about the conservation restriction and it being under transferred the open space because it's a cluster development to the Conservation Commission. However, the special permit that is of record states that the Conservation Commission voted not to take that over, and so there is a homeowners association, and we have transferred that open space into the association. They have insurance on that open space as well. Right. And I believe you have copies of that deed showing that we transferred and recorded the open space.
Yeah, and so this this was before us, what, in 2016, I think?
It's been a while.
Yeah,
yes.
It's been a while, right. So it looks like going back through this, it looked like somehow, so when we had this in front of us in 2016, there was the condition about the open space and some of the work done, the DPW signing off on a punch list, right? And it does look like somehow in the memo from the planning department and probably in our discussions that we talked about conveying the conservation restriction to the Conservation Commission. But it does show in the underlying special permit that it makes that the option, if the commission declines, a homeowners association be created. So that certainly seems like that's satisfied, and it looks like the DPW had signed off on the punch list. Is that fair,
Yes.
Jeff?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay. So does the planning department have any issues with this?
No, and I think it's just worth reiterating that in the 2007 special permit, it's condition number 2, that the board had a meeting on August 21st, and then the commission, so the board voted on August 21st, 2007 to grant the special permit, and then condition number 2 was written with a note that on August 27th, 6 days later, the commission actually declined to take ownership of the parcel. And so for some reason, when the memo from the former city planner was presented, it said that the CR must be conveyed with oversight by the commission, but that had already been decided.
Okay.
So I think that was just misinformation.
Yep.
But at that point in 2016, there were a series of items that DPW wanted corrected. So since then, those items have been corrected. The CR is recorded. And I'm recommending that the board recommend that the city council accept the street.
So the city council formally accepts it, right? We just recommend, based on the planning board's review, that we recommend that they do.
Right, so I think what's happening right now is this
You're in
item,
subcommittee.
yeah, it's going back to the city's safety?
Yes.
Public safety?
Public safety.
Public safety subcommittee. So your recommendation will be for the full city council to accept the street, go back to the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee will refer back to the full city council in a couple weeks.
Yes.
Generally,
Yes.
if that's not convoluted.
That is how it's
Any other
supposed to work.
questions, comments from the board?
No.
Well, let's just, anybody from the public here have any comments or questions regarding this? Okay.
I motion that the planning board make a recommendation to the full city council for acceptance for the Fox Run Road.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? All right.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so now back to our public hearing. The next item on the agenda, Veracruz Food, DBA La Veracruzana, seeking site plan approval at 31 Union Street. Someone here for that? Excellent.
Hi, I am Sunya Hood. I'm the new owner of the La Veracruzanas in Northampton and Amherst, and we are hoping to bring another one to Easthampton. So we're looking for a venue change of 31 Union Street.
All right, so you want to walk through a little bit about what you're doing and what's going on with the site and how you're planning on opening the restaurant there? Any details?
It will seat about 80 to 88 people. It will have a section that is a bar area. If anybody's been in Northampton, we do have a bar. It's a lot of food, and it's not a bar atmosphere, but there is a separate wall that's going to have a little bit of a bar. It's a counter serve.
Can I just clarify, when you say bar, do you include alcohol in that
We
name?
do. We have actually just received our full liquor license from the state, and so that will be given to us, I think, April 1st. I mean, we won't be able to use it, obviously, but we have applied and received the full liquor license there, so that's very exciting for us. We have parking in the back for our employees. We will not allow them to park on the street, so that hopefully won't be a concern for people. We are going through all the hood regulations and exhaust regulations and everything we need for a kitchen. Right now, we just have the upstairs part of it. We have just recently rented the basement, but that is only to be used for storage at this point. Have no plans in the future to use it for anything else but that. It's
So
just-
upstairs is street level, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
upstairs is street level.
And the comic book shop is in the front corner, is that right?
Yes, and we don't,
That's not your space.
no, it will be.
Yep.
But we are not using that, we're not opening that up right now.
Okay.
There's no access, we won't have, the public will not have access to that space
Okay.
at this moment.
Right, the comic book store is moving over to Cottage Street, I read.
Yeah.
recently, so.
Good article.
Yeah.
But you'll eventually have the basement, you're saying, to rent?
We will, but right now, we're just using it for storage because
Gotcha.
the top level, we don't have much storage for that. And we'll move like a little office down there probably just
Yeah.
for the computer and then storage of dry goods.
Okay.
And then I think there was something in the application about waste removal, recycling, that sort of stuff. What's the plan for that?
So that we have, we already have a waste dumpster there and also a cardboard recycling dumpster. And then we will get, I think I wrote it down, the grease that will be removed. It's the same people that do it for our Amherst and Northampton. They come and they'll
Newport
remove-
biodiesel.
Yes.
Sound right?
Yes, thank you.
You did write it down.
And they'll have a disposal there and they'll come and remove it, you know.
Okay.
Do the waste.
Other than that, is there any other waste you guys generate that's sort of unusual or?
No.
No,
No.
so-
And we had Fletcher Plumbing come and look at the pipes and make sure that all that was clean and ready to go and be able to handle the additional plumbing that we would be using versus a retail one bathroom.
And you mentioned the hoods and the venting and stuff. Any issues with sort of exhaust or anything around there that might be an
You know,
issue for
I mean,
neighbors
we're
or?
building it right next to the Indian restaurant, and
Mhm.
the contractor is here if there's deeper questions that might be needed to be asked. But as far as, you know, the exhaust is going to be exhausted up above, any kind of regulations as far as, you know, how high it needs to be will all be taken care of.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you have a question?
Just about the front facade, you showed pictures of the Northampton and Amherst location. You said that this would look very similar to that. Are you also planning to have the awning, the brownish red awning, and as
We
well?
are, so there's that old pool one on there
Yeah.
right now, and I'm having the signage people come and they're looking at the framing to see if they can still utilize that frame, and what the cost would be then just to replace the canvas. And then, just recently, we had, so I'm understanding that we can do like 24 square feet for the actual sign. And so our signage will be within those regulations also,
Okay,
so.
24 square feet. And is there any concerns from the planning board about an awning over the sidewalk or any other
As long as it follows the ordinance.
ordinance? Yeah. There are other businesses with canopies.
I don't know what the sign ordinance says about awnings.
It's something where the applicant should look into it specifically if so the images is tough to see, but the awning currently is retractable. So my understanding is that if it stays retractable and moves in and out, then there are no issues. If the style of the awning were to change to a fixed awning off of the facade there and projecting out permanently, then that's where there is a question about whether that needs approval because you're going over the public sidewalk way. So it's more of a cautionary note, I think, that if the style of the awning were to change to the fixed kind of facade mounted, then there are a couple questions with
Right.
that. But the retractable is not. I don't
And
think
so
it's
that's
subject to
that's
the-
an issue to be determined by the building inspector?
Yes.
If there's-
Yeah, if there's an issue, yeah.
Right, and so to be honest with you, if it's not cost effective for us to replace the canvas, if it becomes too costly, then we would just remove it.
Yeah, okay. Well, in any event, the sign stuff and the awning stuff will be through the building inspector anyway, and hopefully you won't need to come back to us for that.
Okay.
Do you have a question, Jim?
I just wanted to get a sense of your timeline a little bit better. When is the opening date?
Well, when is
you're
my
already
pretend
rushing
opening
it.
day? My pretend opening day would be sometime before Cinco de Mayo or Cinco de Mayo.
Okay.
That's a pretty pretend opening day in the contractors and many other people's minds, because that's only actually 46 or 7 days from now.
Can I
Okay.
ask how many employees you'll have on site at any one given time?
So, there will be 3 employees. And at any time, the most employees, without myself or my husband coming in and out of it, would be like 5 at a time.
And what about hours of operation?
We are going to do a breakfast in Easthampton for Saturday and Sunday only. And so from then it would be from 8 we're closing at 10 Sunday through Thursday and 11 Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
And then on Saturday and Sunday, we'll open up at 8:30, and every other day we open up at 11. So I'm not sure if I gave you clear.
Yeah.
I sort of scattered them and jumped them around on dates, but
We
if you
followed it.
followed me, it's basically Monday
So-
through Thursday, 8 through.
You have the parking spaces in the back for employees. Are you planning on doing deliveries back there or from the street front? What's the plan for that?
We don't do deliveries.
I mean,
ourselves.
deliveries to you, like when you're getting supplies and
Oh, we'll be in
things.
the back.
Yeah, in the back,
Yes.
okay.
Uh-huh.
And any improvements to the back with, as far as lighting or anything like that you're planning on doing?
Currently, I believe there's lighting there that lights it up well.
Okay.
If there seems to be a need for it, I have to be honest and say that it's really gonna come from my employees, my women
Mm-hmm.
employees, that will say it's too dark for me to go out there at the end of the night. But as I have been there the evening, I've been comfortable.
Okay.
And so I don't feel that there's any additional need.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
No, it's pretty straightforward. I agree. Very straightforward.
Anybody from the public, comments, questions? All right, site plan approval, so I think we can just go through these findings real quick, make sure we've
Yeah.
addressed them all. Conformance with the provisions of the ordinances of the City of Easthampton, the general laws of Massachusetts, and all applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. I don't think there's any issues there. Protecting of city amenities and abutting properties through minimizing of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, or historic features on the site. There's no impact on any natural or scenic features. The building's gonna remain the same, more or less, the structure of it, correct? Convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and in relationship to adjoining ways and properties. Again, there's no parking lot for customers, parking spots in the back, and the sidewalk in the front. Adequacy of the methods of disposal and of sewage and refuse and the drainage of surface and subsurface water. So we talked about the trash and recycling and also the grease removal, which I think covers all of that. Adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds, aquifers does not apply. Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including effect on city's water supply, distribution, sewage collection and treatment, fire protection and streets. Nothing inordinate based on what they've proposed. Provisions for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles incidental to the normal operation of the establishment. Parking, lighting, and internal traffic control. Sounds like there'll be no changes to the lighting. There's no requirement for off-street parking, and the loading and unloading will be done in the back. Efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape does not apply. Minimization of the area over which existing vegetation is to be removed does not apply. And then consistency of the development with respect to setback area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping of the surrounding building and development. None of that is changing. So I think that seems to cover everything.
Just one question, and it may have been covered, honestly. I zoned out as I was reading a piece here. Fire sprinklers?
Because of our seating capacity, we do not need, they're not required.
And you have the correct bathrooms for the employee, for the
Have
max
2
capacity?
unisex, 1 and 1 handicap, 1,
Okay.
so standard size.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
I
City
motion-
plan, hold
Well,
on.
sorry, go ahead.
I asked the public, if there's anybody
Oh,
now?
sorry, here.
No, okay. But Jeff?
I think just to proposed conditions for discussion. So the signs, so exterior signs shall be in accordance with section 10.
Yep.
So I think the rendering provided shows it's a little too large. So the maximum size of one sign can be 24 square feet. So the image was 40 square feet. So you can bring that down. It's not already constructed. So that is a condition that can be met.
Yep.
And then just I think for clarity, that the applicant is talking about using the basement for storage, and it's not currently talking about that a space to the right. So any sort of expansion of public floor area is something that would have it come back to the planning board for modification.
I think that makes sense. Everyone
All right.
agree with those?
Great.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable? Do
Yeah,
you
that's very
understand?
fine.
Okay. Okay.
I motion to approve the site plan approval for Vera Cruzana Food DBA La Vera Cruzana at 31 Union Street with the aforementioned 2 conditions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? All right.
Great.
Best
Thank
of
you.
luck.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
So,
Can't wait to.
we'll do a written decision time.
Couple weeks, and because it's site plan approval with no appeal
There's no
period,
appeal
they
period.
are eligible to start with the building permit process. So.
At
Great.
47 days.
Yeah.
Right?
Anyone else
That's
see the
it.
irony
Tomorrow,
of the liquor
coming up.
license on April?
Go to the
Right.
mile,
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck. All right, moving right along. The continued public hearing for River Valley Co-op seeking a special permit at 228
Do
and
we have to hold on that?
232.
Well, they just arrived, but
Yes, we have 8
public.
minutes.
Oh, we're early?
We're early. Look at us.
Yeah, actually, that's, you know what, why don't we jump ahead to the zero lot line
Love
issue
it.
real quick, so we
Timing
can,
is everything, isn't it?
I know it. Look at that.
Yeah, let's get that done.
yeah, let's talk about that proposal. We can do that, I think, in relatively, does that make sense to you, Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Love it.
Is Mr. Michon here, or anybody here that's a
No.
proponent of this? No? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so Jeff, you want to just give us a quick rundown of sort of what prompted this and what they're talking about?
So, there's a couple of different ways that a zoning amendment can be initiated. One is by a property owner for that subject property. But in this case, the developer of One Ferry Street does not yet own the property. That's in the process of being acquired. So,
Can you hold on one second?
Yeah, hey,
We
folks.
have, guys, we have hi, excuse me.
Hold it.
Hey,
Al,
we have an
guys,
active
can we-
meeting going
yeah,
on.
we gotta-
Do you mind taking it elsewhere?
Yeah,
Thanks.
Jeff.
Sorry about it. Sorry.
no,
Distracts me. I'm very easily distracted.
So they
So-
don't own One Ferry Street
correct.
yet?
So they cannot initiate a zoning amendment via citizen petition at this point.
Interesting.
So the current request is for the planning board to consider initiating a zoning amendment for the Mill Industrial District. And the proposal is that currently in the Mill Industrial District, there's, in particular, there's a requirement for a 15-foot side yard setback. And what is happening is that, and it's explained in this letter, that the owner of the prospective owner of One Ferry Street actually got the A&R approved, which is okay, that doesn't comply with the current zoning. So I think that was understood, but to continue actuating sort of the potential sale of individual parcels at One Ferry Street, the desire is to allow a new property line to get drawn that would have a 0 lot line setback. So, big picture, a zoning amendment should not really just apply to one single property. So the proposal is that it applies to the entire Mill Industrial District. And the maps currently in the packet are crude at best. They were pulled from the GIS, and they're sort of nondescript. But a couple areas here are, this is the current property line at One Ferry Street. And I actually will rotate this. So what I aim to do in short order is just show that there is a pretty consistent pattern of 0 lot lines already.
Yep.
So this is the lot line, this is One Ferry Street here. The existing lot line to the right is a separate property that has buildings currently on that property line. So it represents a 0 lot line
Yep.
in existence there. And the idea would be that these maps would be refined if the planning board were interested in pursuing some of this. This map in parcel 20 is the Button Building
Yep.
on Union Street, which is in the Mill Industrial District, which has essentially a 0 lot line. I don't know the measurement for One Cottage Street, but if you go further to the right, there's an existing lot line that separates the building here that has a 0 lot line.
So clear precedence.
Yeah.
Yeah, a pattern, and I think it represents the pattern of development of the Mill District.
Right.
So currently, whether you're constructing a new building, you would have to have a 15-foot setback, or to draw this new boundary line, parcel boundary line, it creates a nonconformity that can't be resolved without the zoning change. So that's the concept.
Our next step would be to say we're interested in investigating this more, and you would come back to us with more information.
Yeah, so actually the step would be tonight asking the planning board if this is something that you'd be willing to pursue.
Yep.
You would be making a motion to bring this amendment to city council. And then city council gets you're basically proposing a zoning amendment to city council.
So are we proposing what they have in here? I mean, one of the things that jumped out to me is, you know, the Mill Industrial District doesn't always abut the Mill Industrial District,
Correct.
right? And so it talks about, I think there's language in here that carves out where it abuts a residential zoning district.
Correct.
But I'm also thinking of if there may be residences that are in the Mill Industrial District, right? And so you may then be frustrated to find out that someone is now able to build right up to your side yard. So I'm curious about that, and how and if that even exists, and if it does, how we might be able to carve out either those lots or that side of such a lot or something like that.
I
But
feel like more information is
I won't,
required.
right, so my question is, are we literally voting on this packet? I mean, I know it comes back to us at least one more time
Right.
with ordinance subcommittee, and then it goes to full city council, but would you suggest that we simply propose this as our new bylaw and then hammer out problems or solutions?
My understanding of the process is that the board would be sending a proposed zoning amendment to city council for city council to refer it to ordinance and back to the planning board.
So we would simply say, we are interested in investigating an amendment for 0 lot lines of the Mill Industrial.
Correct.
And that's it, period.
Right.
And
You don't
then-
need to have all the specifics hammered out. It's just to initiate the process.
Okay.
Has to come from the planning board.
So like in the past, we've crafted what we think, you know, when we did it with marijuana or any of the other things, we've drafted the whole bylaw here as we like it, or even some of the areas where we say we can't figure this part out, but we'll deal with that later, and then it comes back to us. But so you're saying we can sort of just say, flag a 0 lot line in the Mill Industrial Zone, and then when we sit down with ordinance subcommittee, we can flesh out some of the issues with them?
Correct.
And why couldn't we do a variance to the ordinance for this particular property of One Ferry?
You have to have unique feature. I mean, there's a standard for a variance, so you can't just say like, these people seem nice and they deserve it. There's got to be an actual basis, sort of unique features of the property that do that, and so it's sort of.
Buildings are there already, so it's not like, and they're already proposed existing buildings, right? So.
Well, in this case, the problem is that it's creating a new lot line where the lot line could
Before.
be moved 15 feet.
Yeah,
It
okay,
doesn't
that's a good
do
point.
what the owner is desiring it to do, but it could be done. So it's to avoid, a self-created hardship, which, generally you're not entitled to a variance when you're
Right.
creating a hardship that can be
And what
avoided.
was the reasoning behind them doing the 5 different lots for this particular property?
So the way it's explained in the letter,
We should probably read that. I think it'd be helpful.
Sure. Do you want
Sure.
to? Okay.
So this is a letter from Mike Michon, saying, "Dear Mr. Bagg, with respect to the One Ferry Street project, we request consideration of creating 0 lot line parcels through an A&R plan. Our diligence process has indicated that we need to de-risk the project for investors that want to take advantage of the Opportunity Zone tax benefits by segregating individual buildings onto their own independent parcels. This allows investors to have the flexibility to match their investments with timing of their current and future capital gains against our project build-out timelines. The 0 lot lines will create more effective parcels and easements while providing this needed flexibility. We are requesting the planning board consider a zoning modification in all of the Mill Overlay District to include 0 lot lines. Many of the current buildings in the Mill District currently have zero lot line demising walls, as well as having less than the required frontage, rear, and side yard setbacks.
Okay.
So I don't think this was part of the original plan. I think that as they've gone to investors and potential purchasers, they've seen that rather than me own a portion of this parcel, it's easier for me to get financing if I own an independent parcel, even if it would have been the same size as the portion of the existing
Yeah.
parcel.
That makes sense.
Yep, it does. It does. If you're investing and you know it's going to be phased, why are you going to put millions of dollars into something that's not going to be built for 10 years?
Right.
You want to put your money into the first building.
And I think from the city's perspective, as far as the aesthetic of at least the parts of the Mill District that we're talking about, that's consistent with what's there. And
It
so
is.
I think that's where my hesitation is sort of like, I don't know that I'm ready to greenlight the entire thing. I'm curious about what the other facts on the ground are, and I want to think about how to carve out specific things if there are potential
Yeah.
pitfalls. But I'm certainly comfortable with investigating this and starting the process with the city council.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's just me.
Yeah.
Chris's
No, I
point about
agree.
the variance seems, just off the top of my head, like it would be a simpler process because it's
Yeah.
only that one property. Beginning the process of investigating means, since this wants to apply to the entire Mill District, looking at every building in the Mill District and
You'd
finding
have
out
to.
what residents or whatever is next to it. And that seems like there's a lot of opportunity for that plan not to succeed.
Well,
Or to go
remember-
and take years.
Remember that we want things to comply with zoning. We don't want things that are grandfathered in. We don't want variances. We generally want them to follow the rules. And so if there's a valid use or structure that doesn't comply with the rules, instead of telling them, jump through this hoop for an exception, we should change the rules, right? And so it's gonna be a longer process. I mean, it may be a longer process,
And
it
it
may
might
not.
fail because
mean-
other properties might not want.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like there's going to be like along the rail trail where the property was that was having the
Yeah.
noise and odor issue that we were trying to expand their parking lot.
Big
Right.
barriers.
Yeah.
We have to put it. That would be one of the areas we would not want. That
Right, so
building
we
right
would,
up to the lot line.
right, so that's exactly the kind of thing where I think that we need to think about how it would apply in different parts of the mill industrial zone, and if we're comfortable with it anywhere.
Yeah, so it'd have to be.
I mean, a variance is
Bit of a puzzle,
It should
possibly.
be a very high hurdle. It's not something that's really,
I predict that there's gonna be a lot of people in here to discuss that, especially when it involves residences.
Right.
I was,
Once that
sensitive
zone
residence.
gets close to the, like you said, someone's backyard,
I mean, a zero
You're
lot
gonna
line
have a problem.
can be quite the inconvenience, to say
Right.
the least.
Well, we have.
And as of right now, so I annotated the ordinance to show that you asked for the most. So right now it's a 0 front, 0 side, and 0 rear. It doesn't have to end up that way.
Right.
right?
The current, conundrum is a side yard setback that can't be accommodated on an important
Yeah.
project. I think the purpose of starting with this discussion and moving it to city council for them to then refer it back down just saves several weeks in that process of discussing it internally for a series of meetings and then coming up with language and then starting that city council process that then automatically refers
Yeah.
it back to both.
I think what
planning
we'll just
board
do is
and
we'll make clear at that
it's a
first ordinance, at the first joint meeting, we'll make clear that this, unlike past examples, this is not the result of months and months of public hearing and fine tuning. We need to do that now in our
Right,
joint
this
meeters,
is
which
the
we often
beginning.
do in our joint meetings anyway, so.
Right,
I think it probably does expedite the process.
right.
Makes sense.
We did that with
Right.
chickens. We had several.
Yes.
meetings with just chickens.
Right. Did that
I-
pass? Sorry, Jim. Go.
It did. No. It did. So I motion to allow Jeff, on behalf of the planning board, to contact the city council to begin the discussion of 0 lot lines for the Mill Industrial District. Not even
Second,
close to.
if
correct.
that's a good motion.
Right, and I think it would come with a cover letter saying that
Yeah.
on March 19th, the planning board voted to initiate a zoning amendment process for 0 lot lines.
Yeah.
So that goes, so the
Perfect.
goal as, the goal generally is for the board to consider that vote. It would go before the city council on April 3rd, only to be referred to ordinance and
to
back to
us.
planning board. So it's really just to initiate this technical
process,
process
yep.
to come back.
Yep.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Who's second?
Chat seconded. Opposed,
I'm seconded.
abstaining, okay. All right, great. Now, we're after 6:30, so, continued public hearing for the River Valley Co-op seeking a special permit at 228 and 232 Northampton Street. Welcome back.
Thank you. I apologize for my exuberance
That's all right.
to the neighbor.
It's hard to imagine there's anything else going on, but
Something else going on? So, I believe that we've submitted everything that we're going to submit in this matter. Mr. Bagg was nice enough to send along the draft of the decision that he's prepared. And we have just a few comments, and I'm not
Please.
sure whether you want those now?
that'd be great.
Okay. One of the things that we had asked for in the solar permit was approval but not required. Approved but not required. I didn't notice that in there. If I missed it, I apologize, but I didn't see it in there.
Oh, I see. You wanted conditional approval on that, so if you elect not to do it for whatever reason, it's not required.
It's not going to be an election not to do it. It's only going to be if we can't find somebody to actually own this and actually finance it and do it.
Right, okay.
But it's our complete intention, and we want this more than the board does. But we just want that contingency that something happens and we're not able to do it.
I think that certainly was understood, right?
Yep.
We can certainly put that language in.
Yep.
There's no condition for the signs that we had agreed to install both on our premises and across the way on Lyman. And that's what I was talking to the neighbor about, is that sign on Lyman and the best way to approach the city council for that, whether it's to go through the mayor or whether to go through the council. And I know that he has his plan, and but I do think that those signs should be a condition. We committed to them, we committed it to the neighbors, and I think they should be in the permit.
The ones on your property.
The ones on our property.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I had flagged when
Right.
I looked at the draft, is that we should outline specifically, and I think maybe we'll go through that tonight and just hammer out exactly which signs we're talking about, so it's
I
explicit.
thought at the loading dock,
Yeah,
near the entrance exit,
yeah.
and on all of our vendor contracts, we would have
I
something.
liked the invoices, that sort of repeated reminder. And then was there going to be a sign at the corner down by the light too?
If allowable. I mean,
But that's-
Again, that's public way, and so. we
Oh,
don't
right,
get-
okay, right, so that one we can't require, so
You
that's,
could require us to approach the city council, we're happy to do that, however you feel like
Yeah.
doing that, but we want the neighbors to understand that we are committed to that, and we will do that, and we want it in the permit.
Can you list those for my notes again, please, the signs? Loading dock, where else?
Right at the Lyman Street entrance exit, and on our invoices and our vendor contracts.
Vendor contracts, yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
There's a,
Purchase orders, yeah, not really invoices, but
oh, yeah.
purchase orders, really, yep. That's the right word, yep.
the requirement of an A&R, I didn't understand the requirement of an A&R. If we hold both parcels in common title, I don't know what an A&R does to change that. I mean, if you really, really need one for some reason, I guess we could do it, but I just don't think it's necessary.
That's a good discussion piece.
Okay. And the last one, two more. It relates to the signs. Somehow we got into this decision that if a trucker, despite our signs, our invoices, our purchase orders, and everything we've done to implore them not to go up Lyman Street, if they go up Lyman Street, it can't be a zoning violation. That's a traffic violation. It's not a zoning violation.
I mean, I think we can discuss, I think that was definitely brought up last time, that sort of if there's an obligation to not have traffic going up there, and if there's people that still are, I mean, I think there's definitely the recourse to the police for that. But it was certainly something we talked about last time as far as sort of this condition that trucks won't turn left.
Well, the condition is that we will put the signage up. I mean, we're not driving the trucks. I mean, we can't stop the trucks. We can't throw ourselves in front of the trucks and stop them.
On their hands.
Well, I mean, I get that. It's certainly harder, right? But I mean, I think that it depends on the language of the condition. And I mean, when they're on your property at your request, I mean, I think it's, I don't know that we need to include that as a condition, but I certainly think that we could if that's something the board wants to.
Is there a way to not penalize the co-op for it, but then require the co-op, like if it's, say a truck goes up there and someone gets the name of the company, farm that
Mhm.
dropped off, but they didn't get the truck number or something. And they said they went by at 2:30. You know, the city could call you and say, who was this guy from this farm that dropped off produce at 2:30? You could give us the
But that's a police
driver.
issue.
the
That's not planning
That's
board.
not the
I mean-
planning board's not gonna do
Right,
that.
so, I mean, I think the reason that you would put a condition in there is to keep the co-op motivated to keep their suppliers from turning to the left. And so, you know, again, I don't know if this is something that I personally necessarily need in there, but it keeps, I mean, I think the applicant has been here and has gone, you know, bent over backwards to take on all these steps, and I mean, frankly, I don't feel the need for a language that conditions that they go to the city council for signage, because I think that they're gonna do that, and I also think that the neighbors are too. But I can see a situation where an applicant or a permittee is not as concerned about that, and they put up their signs, but then they say, well, you know, good luck to you if you can make your left turn, right? So like, at some point, it keeps them motivated to hound your suppliers.
I
don't
like
know
the
that-
intent for coercion, but to make it so that if a truck does go left, it jeopardizes their permit. I agree with the applicant.
Well, it doesn't
That's-
jeopardize the permit, right? I mean, it's a violation that can be fined by a fine from the building inspector.
Yeah, but if
The intent was that it would be substantiated, so I don't think it was intended to be one rogue, you know, vehicle. It would be that if someone who lives on Lyman Street was able to observe a pattern, you know, of a specific vehicle that could be located back to River Valley as one of their vendors, you know, it's, so police missed it, so they are not able to enforce it, but if it were able to be substantiated, then the building inspector could begin a process of issuing River Valley Market with a fine. It's a daily fine per violation.
Yeah, but with
It's
proper
not likely to
signage,
happen, but
with proper signage, and maybe, I don't know if this is going too far, small leaflet saying that, remember, you do not make a left turn, and hand it to those drivers as they're leaving. You must have people there to tell them, don't forget to not make
Well,
that left
I
turn.
mean, they've already put something on the loading dock, a sign on the loading dock. They're sending stuff on their purchase orders and their
there's a sign in the
But if we
contracts.
make it
There's
a
sign as
condition,
they make the
it's-
turn.
Can I read
If
this?
this is
Yeah.
a condition, then they're in violation.
Under, I'm just gonna throw this out, under section 3 of the draft conditions, bullet point, it says, the project includes a new vehicle intersection with Lyman Street, which is designed with a specific arrangement so as to direct larger vehicles to Route 10 and not traverse Lyman Street to Florence Road. As offered by the applicant, the permit is conditioned to require the owners direct in writing their vendors that access to and from the property for delivery shall only be from Route 10.
Right.
Is there
So-
another location in here where it's
Yeah,
saying?
so in the
Yes.
conditions, under number 3 of the conditions,
and it should be broken into 3 and 4. So it's a typo. Condition
Okay.
number 3 says one thing. The second sentence should be its own.
oh
Substantiated
yeah,
violations.
so
Got it.
the applicant through its managers will direct all vendors to enter and to exit the property only from the section of Lyman Street closest to Route 10. Substantiated violations of the truck exclusion by vendors serving the subject property shall constitute a violation under section 12.5 of the zoning ordinance.
And that's the meat of it right there, is
Right.
that last
Right,
line in
that's
section 3 of
basically,
conditions.
That's what I was addressing, yes.
Yep. Okay, any other comments or?
Oh, yes, Captain Jack's. Yeah. I always call it Trader Joe's.
Foodie and slip.
Yeah.
Done with you.
We are right now in lease negotiations with Captain Jack's, with Kevin. But I don't think it's appropriate to condition this on Captain Jack's. It's an accessory takeout restaurant, and it could be Captain Jack's. 5 years from now, it could be something else, but I don't believe that if we're not changing the footprint or the use, that's really something that's in the planning board's bailiwick. This is, I mean, it's all about the use, not the user. That's the kind of the adage that land use lawyers.
Where was the reference to Captain Jack's?
Are you talking about condition 1C?
Yes.
Yes.
Got it.
Oh, I see, okay.
Condition 1C.
Yes, the tenancy is what.
Yeah,
we're
the
talking
tenancy part doesn't seem like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I had use, size, and location.
Right.
It changes to use, size, or location.
right.
changes to the tenancy of the existing structure. They don't name Captain Jack specifically, but it's.
No, but it's any change to the tenancy. So, I mean, I would tend to agree with that we don't,
I concur.
I mean, we're approving that use as a restaurant in that portion of the site, and it could be someone else as long as it doesn't change the size or the location or.
Right.
What about what about if the building were, so what about removal of the building?
So, yeah.
Oh,
Right.
that's absolutely.
Okay.
That's
A change in use.
about the use, not about
Yep,
the use.
okay.
And can I roll back a question to the last question we were talking about real quick? I'm looking for your legal expertise. It says here in section 3 of conditions that the last sentence, which we just discussed, substantiated violations. Those two words seem important to me because violations is plural. It seems to indicate that you have to have more than one. Am I reading that?
I mean, I think
Inappropriately?
we'd have to talk about what we want, if we want that at all, and what language it would be, because I think you could certainly say multiple violations or, I mean, I think you could read that whole thing as saying any substantiated violation of the truck exclusion, that it doesn't have to be multiple and
It could
repeated.
be read that way, so it definitely needs change.
If I was on the other
And what
side,
does
I could.
substantiated even mean? Substantiated by whom?
Right.
Right, so I mean,
Presumably it's substantiated by the building commissioner.
right, so
That was
it
that
like.
was the presumption of
Right,
that.
so the idea is that, like any of the conditions that we have, the building inspector is in charge of enforcing those conditions, and if in his determination there's a violation, he is authorized to do any number of things, including a daily fine. That can be appealed to the ZBA. I mean, there's multiple avenues for that, but I think all of that is stuff that we delegate to the building commissioner for determining if there's a violation, and if so, what he thinks should be done about it.
So you concur that if we decide to keep this sentence in here, that we should reword this to be more specific, sending it, that it's the building inspector that substantiates.
No, I don't think we need to clarify that. I mean, that's just the process in town government. I mean, we don't determine building violations. I mean, we've had cases where it's even come before us, right? And we refer those
So you
allegations.
think by leaving it this way, it's inferred?
I think the building inspector's role is clear. I don't know that it's clear about what we consider to be a violation, or what we consider to be enough violations, or if we even want violations by vendors to be treated as a zoning violation.
I think we need to hammer that out.
I definitely think that's an area for further discussion. Any other issues you guys found in that decision at this point?
I think it's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I guess at the outset, is there anybody here who has any comments or questions? Okay. In the past with these, we've gone through each of the findings and sort of handled them one at a time. Does that make sense here? Yeah, okay. So, we'll start with specific findings, section 7332. A permit shall be granted unless the permit granting authority finds in writing that there is substantial evidence that A, the specific site is not an appropriate location for such use, B, a nuisance is expected to be created by the use, and C, adequate and appropriate facilities will not be provided for the proper operation and maintenance of the use. The proposed finding says the planning board finds that the concept of the proposal meets this provision based on the following. The site is an appropriate location for the proposed carport solar array as it is located in the highway business zoning district, does not require any tree removal, and is not a principal use, and rather is integrated into the larger development of the supermarket use. No nuisance is expected by the construction of the carport. Ground-mounted and building-mounted solar associated with this project and any associated generator will be situated within the designated loading zone and refuse storage area, making it an integrated part of the commercial operation. The carport's solar design will be constructed pursuant to all existing building and safety codes, and the site design includes drainage mitigation to capture sheet flow water and snow melt. The ground-mounted solar will be situated in close proximity to the parking area and will be compatible with the overall commercial use of the property. And the proposed solar elements were included as part of the ordering conditions and a stormwater management permit from the Conservation Commission issued on March 4th, 2019. Any issues with that? That makes sense? Okay. Special permit and building inspector issue permit. No large solar energy facility shall be erected, constructed, installed, or modified as provided in this section without first obtaining a special permit from the planning board and a building permit from a licensed building inspector. All such solar energy systems shall be constructed and operated in a manner that, where economically feasible, minimizes adverse visual, safety, and environmental impacts, The construction of a solar facility shall be permitted subject to the issuance of a permit and provided that the use complies with all requirements set forth in section 7.3 and 7.4. Proposed finding says the planning board finds that prior to the issuance of a building permit, all final plans shall be reviewed by the planning board at a public meeting. And I think we talked about that last time, right? Okay. 7382, small solar energy facilities require a building permit prior to construction or installation. Proposed finding says the planning board finds that any building mounted solar will require a building permit and is approved as part of this special permit. 7383, setbacks. Solar energy facilities shall be set back a distance 50 feet from the nearest property line and private or public way. Proposed finding says the planning board finds that based on the submitted information, the required setback is met by the proposed arrangement. 7384, setback waiver. The permit granting authority may reduce the minimum setback distance as appropriate based on site-specific considerations or written consent of the affected abutters if the project satisfies all other criteria for the granting of a site plan under the provisions of this section. The proposed finding states the planning board finds that based on the submitted information, no setback waiver for any of the solar structures is required. 7385, general required documents. I'm not going to list all of those documents. Proposed language says the planning board finds that the submitted conceptual site plan showing the location and design of the solar array is sufficient for the issuance of a special permit. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, all the elements listed in this section shall be included in the final packet for review by the planning board. 7386, financial surety. The permit granting authority may require the applicant for large-scale solar facilities to provide a form of surety, either through escrow account, bond, or otherwise, to cover the cost of removal in the event the city must remove the facility, of an amount and form determined to be reasonable by the special permit granting authority, but in no event to exceed more than 125% of the cost of removal and compliance with the additional requirements set forth herein, as determined by the applicant. Such surety will not be required for municipally or state-owned facilities. The applicant shall submit a fully inclusive estimate of the costs associated with removal prepared by a qualified engineer. The amount shall include a mechanism for cost of living adjustment. The proposed finding states the planning board finds that no surety associated with the removal of the solar structures is required as part of this permit. Specifically, the board finds that the solar use is not a principal use of the property and will be integrated into the redevelopment of the commercial property, and that commercial buildings do not normally require removal of structures once the use has ceased. Everyone okay with that generally?
That's good.
7387, technical documentation. More submissions. Proposed finding states that the planning board finds that these technical documents shall be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit. 7388, visualizations. The proposed finding states the planning board found that no additional visualizations are required, but may be submitted prior to the issuance of the building permit.
So can I just on that one, I just wanted to make sure that the expectation is in line with what this board would expect. So there were a couple images of the carport solar submitted. I worded this so that the applicant could provide additional, but I wanted to try to be clear that the expectation would not be that coming back they would have to. So I just wanted to have the discussion that whether you think as part of the submission that you would require, so the wording is that planning board may require visualizations.
Well, maybe submitted prior to the issuance of the building permit too, right?
Right, so
Yeah.
so it's a kind of a question of whether you want to give them the waiver from providing additional visualization in a couple months when they come back, or whether you would like to have that.
In my opinion, if we don't have to require it now to change our mind and decide we need it later, right? So I mean, I would lean towards not requiring it, and if for some reason it looks like it presents some issues, we can raise that with the applicant when they're here, but.
Right. You know, we're going to be providing you with cut sheets, and you're going to see what these things look like anyway.
Right.
I would also point out, I didn't point out in my email to Jeff earlier, but I did talk to Jeff about this before. It's our position that none of the large-scale solar stuff applies here, because this is not primarily to be sold to the grid, and so those things just don't apply at all.
Right, and so I think that where those things, I mean, it's certainly the first time that this board has handled sort of a mixed use with solar, right? So we're sort of trying to find our way, and the bylaw is not completely clear. I mean, I mean, no, about a mixed use, like in this context, right? Like how to treat that. And so I would agree that I don't think this is a large scale. It meets the definition of large scale. I don't think that there's anything in the bylaws that prohibit us from asking for any other information in other cases, right? So that's why my thought for these things is to not require you to present that with the solar plan. But obviously, if we get it in front of us and we're uncomfortable with a lack of information on something, we can always ask for something else, just like we can ask for people to give us more information any other time. So I certainly don't want to make you jump through these large-scale project requirements where we don't think that they're going to provide any information more than anything else.
Right.
So that's at least my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but
So as it stands, it says that we found that no additional vision is required, but they may be submitted, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
So
Yeah,
Right.
maybe.
Great.
I think that makes sense. Jeff, is that clear to you?
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
that's fine.
Operation and maintenance plan. The applicant shall submit a plan for maintenance of access roads and stormwater controls, as well as general procedures for operational maintenance of the solar facility. The proposed finding states this should be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit. I think that's reasonable. 7389, landscape plan. That does specifically say applies to large-scale projects only. The proposed finding states the planning board finds that all exterior lighting shall minimize glare on abutting property owners as shown on the submitted lighting plan. A final lighting plan associated with the carport solar system shall be reviewed by the planning board. So I guess if that changes at all from what we've seen.
Right. Just to be clear, we haven't submitted a plan with a lighting plan
Right.
with lights under those carports, so that
Right.
would be part of the submission.
Right, I think that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to put on the record here that I am concerned that, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when we've got to redo this, we're going to be facing, I'm not going to be facing, it won't be me, but somebody's going to be facing a finding by this board that this is a large-scale solar, and it's not. And so I think there needs to be a statement in here that this is not a large-scale solar facility.
I thought we had determined it was large scale. It's mixed use is the issue. Based on the
Large scale
bylaw,
must be-
I thought the scale was large. I
The
could be
size
remembering.
is large-scale, but the definition
It
of
meets the
large-
definition of large scale, does it not?
No, because large scale says, a commercial solar facility where the primary use of the facility is electrical generation to be sold to the wholesale electricity market. And this is not for sale to the wholesale electricity market.
I thought we discussed in the meetings earlier that it's not the, and I agree with the first part of that it's not the primary use, but that if there was some overage, you might put that back in the
But
grid.
it's not primarily.
Not primarily, but you might do it. That's fairly close to me.
But you used the word, the primary use of the facility.
That part I agree with.
Is generation to be sold to the wholesale market.
I think it's gray enough to be of concern.
Is there a megawatt limit for small versus large?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
So the ordinance was not written for this for this use, because in the definitions there's a definition of large scale, which, as the attorney read, it starts with a commercial solar facility where the primary use is electric generation to be sold on wholesale market. Goes on to say includes equipment, machinery, and structures utilized in connection with the conversion of solar energy into electrical power with a rated output greater than 100 kilowatts. So it achieves the size threshold.
But it's
not
not
right.
primarily for sale to the.
So then there's a definition of small, and then there's a definition of on-site solar facility, which is a solar project which is located at a commercial, industrial, agricultural, institutional, or public facility that will generate electricity on site. Other than that definition of on-site facility, that does not appear anywhere else in the rest of the ordinance.
So then the other question is, do we condition the solar that it can only be used on-site, or at least primarily on-site? I mean, because the flip side is also true, right? That you could change your mind in 10 years and,
I have
ju-
no
right?
problem
So,
with the condition and not primarily for sale to the wholesale market, no problem with a
I mean-
condition like that.
Well, why don't we add that?
Yeah, put that in there.
I don't know. I mean, to me, the problem with this is I think some of the requirements for the large scale are based on the size of the project itself, right? And don't change whoever it's being sold to, right? So from a zoning perspective, we're looking at those structures and the circumstances that surround it. So, I mean, if we're looking, just think of many of the solar fields we've done, right? They're all going to the grid, but I don't know that most of those considerations would have changed if there was a use on site that it was all going towards. It still sort of concerns that we sort of have
Yeah,
to.
it's a little
This is how
tricky
the
because
city council defined it. and they
I
defined
know.
it. And so I'm just reading the words.
Yeah.
And that is primarily for sale to the wholesale market. This isn't
But
primarily.
I do feel that you're honing in on those words primary because they're advantageous. I definitely think for me personally, when I looked at this to determine if it fit, I didn't think it fit neatly, but it was really the wattage that stood up for me as the litmus test of what large wasn't. And you did apply for the wattage. So for me, that's more where I honed in.
Right.
Well,
There
we-
are two requirements. It's got to be of a certain wattage and primarily for sale to the wholesale market.
So it just
And
depends
we
on the
meet
angle
one,
of
but we don't
looking.
meet the other. I don't, look, I'm not gonna, this is not gonna hold up, anything on our end, but I just think it's inappropriate to call this a large scale because it's not for
Disagree.
sale. And really what this is an on-site solar facility. And if the city council had only put in some regulations of on-site solar facilities, we wouldn't be talking about
And I
this.
think
Well-
it's a large on-site.
Well, if you look at 7.3.3, so it's general requirements for all solar energy facilities. The following requirements are common to all solar energy facilities and must be followed in addition to the technology-specific requirements given in 4, 7.5, and 7.6. And this is where Mr. Sewell points out that, lo and behold, there's another drafting error in this ordinance, that there's actually not a 7.4 or 7.5 or 7.6, but there is a 7.3.4 and a 7.3.5 and a 7.3.6. So I think it's a terrible mess that we're trying to do the best we can with. I think that there's an avenue that all of the provisions in this apply to any of them except for the building mounted ones or small. So we're gonna have to figure out a place to be halfway.
So,
So your issue was that you don't want to get locked into it being called large and be defined by that, which doesn't perfectly apply. And I think it's a legitimate issue that he brings up, that that we need to be cautious on how we label this. But we can't change the zoning at this point. I mean, we have to abide the zoning as much as possible.
Right. I think you want to be able to apply
Could we
this
say
zoning to this project so that it's regulated. I think that's a good commendable approach.
maybe we could come up with, we find that it applies to both on-site and large, to aspects of both on-site and large, and find that that it works other than that.
I mean, I think so far where we ended with the landscape plan, which then has in parentheses large-scale projects only. I think this is the first place that you're actually making a finding on something that's large-scale.
right.
Before this, it seemed like it was all general requirements for all solar facilities. So, if the landscape plan is an issue where it calls out large-scale projects only, then maybe this finding is not applicable, or we wordsmith
Do you think we can strike
some
it?
kind of finding in here to just.
We need something.
Yep, we may need something just to clarify the intent for someone looking at this in 10 years.
Right, because if you look at it as a whole, it does look large scale, but it's not considered large scale. It's not for large scale. So you got wording on one side, it looks that it could be large scale, and then the other side, it's not for large scale.
And the problem is we have to be careful what we say. We can't say that
Right.
it was unclear, so we just made this decision, based on
No,
what we can't,
and
because
it
that-
looks like the
it's arbitrary.
solar has to be looked at as a whole, not just parts of it.
As long as it's on-site consumption, I don't care how big it is, personally. What's that gonna do? If they're using it on-site, who cares how big it is? It's
Right.
being used on-site, is it
But-
not?
Correct, but I think
So what
that.
difference does it make?
But I think just because it qualifies as an on-site doesn't exempt it from any of this ordinance.
I agree.
Right.
It's
doesn't
clear that
exempt
this
it.
says
They could turn around
the
and
following
use it.
requirements are common to all solar energy facilities and must be followed in addition to the technology-specific requirements given in 3 additional sections. So I don't think it's not that if you find that it's on-site, by definition, you just put the bylaw away and you're done. It's not the case. I think there are other provisions that apply.
Right.
So it would apply to decommissioning, it would apply to all these other things.
To move us forward, I think, and I'm not particularly liking this, I'm not gonna sleep well with this, to be honest. But I think that, to be cautious, it does apply to enough of the large scale that we have to keep it in. That's my thinking in that. I do think we continue to work with not requiring the 125% and so many other aspects of it, but I don't think we have another option. That's just my take.
There is another option. And the
Uh,
other option
Can you come up here, sorry, just so we can be recording everything?
So the ordinance has solar energy facility, small solar energy facility, and large solar energy facility. This is a solar energy facility. It is not a small solar energy facility. It's not a large solar energy facility. It's just a solar energy facility. And only those things that apply to solar energy facilities, to all solar energy facilities, apply here. I could make the case that no special permit is required because your ordinance says large scale, special permits required. This is not a large scale. Right, it just isn't. I mean, I didn't define this. The city defined it. I'm just reading the definition, and it's not a large-scale facility because it is not primarily intended for sale to the wholesale market. And we'll take a condition that this is primarily for use on site. I have no problem with that.
But you do, I mean, the general requirements does say for all solar energy facilities, right?
Those general requirements, but anything that says for large scale just doesn't apply. And when I did the findings and I submitted the findings, I don't know if Jeff circulated the findings that I did, I pointed that out, that this is not a large scale solar facility. Notwithstanding that, we don't believe that we need more visualizations or whatever it is. But I would appreciate, just something in the permit stating that this does not appear to be a large-scale facility, that's all. And just so that I don't get hooked in and locked into this being a large-scale facility.
So I'm just looking at these now. I'm looking at any of the requirements that do apply. It looks like the ones that we're talking about here are the landscape plan, the independent consultant, and the visualizations.
There was one other, I thought.
Was it the money,
No, I don't think so.
Well, of course, the requirement for a special permit is for large scale. No large scale energy facility shall be erected, constructed. And that is in 7.38.8.1. There was one other that financial surety. This landscape plan, independent consultant, yep, that's about it.
I got an idea.
Yep.
Why can't we have it, as long as it's on-site consumption, like you're on-site, right? As long as you're using it on-site, then it would go the way it is, but then if you were gonna go and sell it to the grid, then you would have to reapply, and then that solar would be applied to a regular solar loss. You do that?
Well, the issue is not whether anything is sold to the
Right,
grid.
it's primarily.
It's for the primary purpose of selling it to the grid. That's the way the ordinance is written.
It's the primary reason.
You know, there may be an occasion where, for whatever reason, we don't use it all, and, you know, we're gonna send it to the grid, but it's gonna be a minute portion of what's generated. Because I believe that this store is gonna take more than is generated from these panels.
Well, then wouldn't you need some kind of hookup from that place to the grid off your property?
There's gonna be a need for an electrical connection and service anyway.
So you can backtrack it off of that thing into the grid?
I'm not sure how the solar piece, you know.
So he just said that if there might be a minute amount being pushed toward, any amount being pushed to the grid considers a large solar field. If you're gonna give it to the grid in any portion whatsoever, then you can't be considered just.
That's not the way the definition.
The definition is a commercial solar facility where the primary use of the facility is electrical generation to be sold to the wholesale electricity market. So.
and then it goes on to talk about the wattage, but you're
right.
It does not
Yeah,
apply
it
to that
does.
part. Flat out, it does not
And
apply.
you know, the other thing is, this
That
isn't really a
doesn't-
commercial solar facility. This is an on-site solar, this is a commercial food establishment with an ancillary solar on it. This is not a commercial solar facility. We're trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole here.
Exactly.
And it's not easy, but
Yeah.
the truth is, it just doesn't apply in that way. And I'm telling you, I don't think that this ordinance was ever intended to apply to this situation, which is why you had the on-site solar facility and then failed to have any regulation on it.
I think the four things that we've addressed in here, the landscape plan, independent consultants, visualizations, and the surety, I'm not sure that we particularly need them here anyway.
Well, because in every case, we're finding that they're not necessary, which
Yeah.
kind of leads us to not needing any of it.
So then why, what is the concern with saying in the conditions that this is not a large-scale solar project?
Well, I think what we
We're
would
not
say in
finding
the
them.
conditions is, this is not a large-scale solar project
As defined
as
in
long as the primary use is not. And I tend to disagree. I think that we can sort of segregate out the solar use from the grocery store use. So I think that even if the primary use of the property is the grocery store, I think if the solar panels are primarily designed to generate for the grid, I would think of that as large scale. So
I
so
agree.
I'm sort of treating those as separately. So I can imagine a condition that says, provided that the continued use of the solar panels is not primarily for, the language in the bylaw, sale to the grid, that this is not a large-scale solar project. In the event that that changes, a new special permit is required for that.
No problem with that.
So if we were to put that in as sort of a finding, one of the findings, then we would strike 73810 because 73810 only applies to large scale.
We would
solar
strike a
facilities.
couple more before that, too.
7389 as well.
And 7388.
And I am so happy to have been wrong about my earlier statement.
So-
Because I can sleep.
Something's good.
That makes sense.
So I think if we cross those
That finding
and
you
make that
averted-
finding, Jeff, are you comfortable with that? I think this is a situation where it doesn't particularly matter based on what we're gonna see, and I think as long as that use is a condition, then we're all right. And also, they're gonna be back in front of us when they come together with their plan anyways, and we can look at that then. And
Yeah, I'm trying to draft a little finding to support this, and we're comfortable if it were in the findings somewhere.
Yep.
Um,
and then a condition.
Right, and the condition would be,
That it not be primarily for sale to the grid.
Yeah.
And if it is, we need another special.
Yeah.
I almost have it here. Maybe. So, the planning board finds that that for the purposes of the, finds that
That the proposed use of the solar facility does not constitute a large-scale solar project because it is not primarily for sale to the grid or whatever that language is. And then we can, as a condition, say in the event that the solar facility does this, they're required to get a special permit.
yeah.
So you're saying no matter what number of years, if they decide, well, we want to use it as a solar field and we're gonna send it all to the grid, they have to come back to us.
Right.
It's exceedingly unlikely, given the design, that could ever be triggered, so I mean, it's just
Right.
easy.
I mean, I think, I can imagine a scenario,
just-
but I think in that situation, they should come back and
Yeah, I agree.
reveal
Well,
that.
right, I
A lot
wanna
of that will
see-
be rendered moot by the fact that it's already constructed, but,
Right.
I think you came up
Well,
with
We're
that-
sending all the electricity to the grid, we've got bigger problems than
Yeah,
than
right,
the solar
right.
panels. Because we need
Okay.
that power on site.
are you good? Can I
think
move
so.
on?
Yeah, so the planning board finds that the proposed use of the solar array is not considered a large-scale solar facility provided that the energy generated is not primarily sold to the wholesale energy market.
There you go.
It's just maybe flip
Yep.
the text or the.
And then we'll have similar, as a condition, we'll have
Yep.
basically the same thing requiring that if they intend to do that, they have to get a special permit.
Yeah, a new special
Right.
permit is required. Yep. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Moving on, 739, building integrated solar energy facilities. Permits shall be granted by the permit granting authority for building integrated solar energy facilities that meet the criteria outlined in this section and in section 7.3 of the zoning provision. The proposed finding states the planning board finds that the concept of building integrated solar is approved as part of the special permit. 7391,
Isn't that recursive? That it's
Yeah,
calling itself
sounds
and
it.
itself by referencing section 7.3?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just noting.
yes. No building integrated solar energy facility shall be erected, constructed, installed, or modified as provided in this section without first obtaining a permit from the planning board. The construction of a building integrated solar energy facility shall be permitted subject to the issuance of a special permit and provided that the use complies with all requirements set forth in sections 3 and 4. All such solar energy facilities shall, where economically feasible, be constructed and operated in a manner that minimizes any adverse visual, safety, and environmental impacts. The proposed finding states, the planning board finds that the concept of building integrated solar is approved as part of the special permit. Final information related to the building integrated solar system shall be submitted to the board for review at a public meeting prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Is that where we would say approved but not required, or is that just over in the conditions?
Where should we put in that the solar is not a requirement of the, I mean, we do generally have language at the beginning that talks about everything in conformance with the plans.
Yep.
So I suppose we could put in a sentence there that says, you know, something along the lines of, well, the solar use, you know, if there's going to be solar use, it has to be in conformance with the plans, but if they elect for whatever reason not to pursue the solar facility as proposed, it's not a requirement for the rest of the special permit.
So I'm just looking at the structure of the way the decisions are structured, which, there's, on the first description, which was the legal ad, there's a list of submissions which go into an appendix, then there's a description. It could be listed in the description as a separate sort of paragraph or sentence to specify the nature of the solar approval. It could be there, or
I was imagining the part after decision where we talk about the incorporated plans.
So that's on page 2. The decision incorporates that. The
So I think if
minutes.
we do that and we say something, I mean, I think what we want to say is two things. One is that you don't have to do solar if for whatever reason you elect not to do solar. And two is, if you do solar, it's got to be in accordance with the plans that you've submitted. But they're going to have to come back with solar anyway, so.
Yep.
And all the findings and conditions
Right.
referencing solar.
Right. Yeah.
So why are we going through all these conditions and findings now?
Right. Well, that was you know that's it's the nuance of what we're trying to do is give them the clear approval of the solar, so that they
Generally.
can pursue financing and the additional arrangements.
Okay.
Right.
I
That's
should
what
keep
we
reading
talked
while
about.
you wordsmith something for that.
I think we only have one more solar here. So, 7392, required supporting documentation for building integrated solar energy facilities. I'm not going to list all the documents. The proposed finding is the planning board finds the integration of the building-mounted solar into the new building design will allow these provisions to be met. The information listed herein shall be submitted to the board for review at a public meeting prior to the issuance of a building permit. You're comfortable with all that? Okay.
Okay, so just going back real quick, we're going through the sections that specifically are related to large scale, and we're gonna consider them not applicable.
Right.
That's correct.
So does that include the financial surety section?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, we-
Oh, yeah, that
Anything that
should.
says large section only is out.
we had
So they're-
already.
We're good with the 7.385, which is general requirements. We're good with that.
Yep.
The general requirement applies to all of them.
And 7387,
7387.
technical documentation.
Yep. So visualizations is not applicable.
Landscape plan, independent consultants.
Okay. All right. That's good. Thanks.
Which we had largely not required anyway.
Right.
So, okay, moving right along to our regular special permit considerations. Conformance with the provisions of the ordinances of the city of Easthampton, the general laws of Massachusetts, and all applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. Proposed finding states, the planning board finds that all applicable regulations of the state and federal government shall apply and be met by this project, including but not limited to the building code, architectural access board, Americans with Disabilities regulations. 2, protection of city amenities and abutting properties through the minimizing of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, or historic features on the site. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the project will provide a desirable upgrade to the intersection of Lyman Street and Route 10, little typo there, Jeff, and. The realignment will involve the donation of a portion of the corner of the property to the city to allow the widening and turning radius for larger vehicles turning south out of Lyman Street. And that isn't one that we have to be conditional on, right? Because
No, we're
that's
doing-
happening either way, and we don't
we're
need
doing
state
that part of the
approval, so
project.
we're good with that, okay.
Yeah.
The applicant has offered to assist in efforts to refine and/or update the requirements of the existing truck exclusion on Lyman Street. The board found that so much of the southern portion of the property is a natural feature, it will remain as protected wetlands, and that there are no scenic or historic features associated with the property.
So,
Maybe we put in the signage, a reference to the signage in there too. Requirements of the existing truck exclusion on Lyman Street, including signage on their loading dock at the exit and on contracts and purchase orders with their vendors.
Yep.
Does that work for the applicant?
Contracts and purchase orders, not invoices.
What's that?
Just contracts and purchase orders, they wouldn't be on an invoice.
Right. 3, minimization of traffic and safety impacts on the proposed development on adjacent highways or roads and maximizing the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that based on the city engineer letter dated March 5th, 2019, and the applicant's traffic impact study revised February, we need a date in there, right?
February, what?
it's just February.
It was just
Yeah,
February,
yeah,
okay.
it's true.
That the project will minimize traffic and safety impacts on adjacent highways or roads as follows. The project incorporates a desirable upgrade to the intersection of Lyman Street and Route 10. The realignment will involve the donation of a portion of the corner of the property to the city to allow the widening and turning radius for larger vehicles turning south out of Lyman Street. Next, the project includes a new vehicle intersection with Lyman Street, which is designed with a specific arrangement so as to direct larger vehicles to Route 10 and not traverse Lyman Street to Florence Road. As offered by the applicant, the permit is conditioned to require the owners direct in writing their vendors that access to and from the property for delivery shall only be from Route 10. I think it should say shall only be from, it's not really from Route 10, it's the Lyman Street. How did we phrase that before?
Yeah.
The Route 10 end of Lyman Street? The applicant will install directional signs on the subject property facing vehicles exiting the property onto Lyman Street to direct them onto Route 10 instead of onto Lyman Street towards Florence Road. And the submitted traffic impact statement concludes that with certain mitigation measures supported by this decision but not required to grant the special permit, including signal timing at the intersection of Northampton and O'Neill Street and northbound turn lane into the property, is not shown to have an appreciable impact on the traffic operations for the study area roadways and intersections. The board finds that certain requirements are subject to the review and approval process of Mass DOT. The board supports the improvements to Route 10. However, the special permit is not dependent upon those elements.
So that was, that was just a question that there's a chicken and egg situation with Mass DOT that they want to see the local approval, that the local approval understands that there would be potentially those upgrades, but not necessarily tying the special permit to them.
Right.
So that was the goal of that.
And you had a question about the sidewalk. You got my email about the sidewalk?
Right. So, yeah.
The sidewalk is part of the project.
Okay.
Right.
And we will be constructing the sidewalk.
So the
Okay.
sidewalk is not contingent on any DOT approval, and that, okay, is that in there? Is that in here somewhere, Jeff?
I had it called out as a question in the comments. So,
Okay.
I would say that this is a good place
That's
to
a good
include
place
it, so
for it.
it's
We can do a new
vehicular
bullet
pedestrian
point.
movement. Okay. So
Okay.
I'll add. Yep.
4, adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage and refuse and the drainage of surface and subsurface water and adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds, aquifers, and well areas. Proposed finding, the planning board finds that the project includes a designated loading zone area at the rear of the property which encloses the areas for refuse and recycling. The site plan incorporates and consolidates the refuse area for the accessory food establishment use currently operated as Captain Jack's Roadside Shack. The board finds that all surface and subsurface drainage, wetland buffer areas, and associated site work will occur in accordance with the order of conditions and stormwater management permit issued by the Conservation Commission on March 4th, 2019. 5, mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including the effects on the city's water supply and distribution system, sewage collection and treatment systems, fire protection, and streets. The planning board finds that the project will include the transfer of a portion of the corner of the property at Lyman Route 10 intersection to the city to facilitate and enhance vehicular movements and the relocation of an existing fire hydrant. The project will include new sewer connections to the city's existing infrastructure along Route 10, with no impacts to capacity from the new supermarket use. The new building will be fully code compliant in all current building and fire protection codes. There's a gravel improved path for enhanced fire truck access to the rear of the property. This area will also provide the rear access off of Lyman Street and short-term parking areas to Captain Jack's.
I think it should say the tenant or
Yeah.
something like that.
The area currently used by Captain
Yep,
Jack's.
well, I would just describe the accessory food establishment.
Oh,
Yep.
excellent.
So change Captain Jack's accessory food
Yeah.
establishment.
Yeah.
6, provision for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles incidental to the normal operation of the establishment, parking, lighting, and internal traffic control. The planning board finds that the project includes 200 parking spaces where the ordinance requires. Do we know that answer yet?
No, I don't offhand.
We'll get that to you.
We can fill it in. It was
Okay.
just to compare.
It's less than 200?
It's less than 200.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
I want to say 175, but I'm not positive.
Okay. The site includes a designated loading zone area. Interior vehicular movements will be directed to parking areas with raised crosswalks and planted islands for pedestrian safety. 7, applicants' efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features such as vegetative buffers and retention of open space or agricultural land. The planning board finds that the project as designed will significantly enhance the overall aesthetics of the property through the replacement of paved parking immediately adjacent to the street with a landscaped area to soften the view of this prominent property. The project generally maintains the extent of the existing paved areas to the south, bordering wetlands, or the adjacent property to the west, which contains some residences. 8, minimization of the area over which existing vegetation is to be removed. Where tree removal is required, special attention is to be given to the planting of replacement trees. The planning board finds that the combined project sites are largely paved and/or disturbed commercial property, and the proposed site landscaping plan will enhance the visual aesthetics of the property and provide for the creation of vegetated drainage swales and interior site landscaping where little
To none.
Yeah.
little to none exist. Got that one, Jeff?
I gotta leave something
I know.
in there.
And there isn't any tree removal proposed with this, is that right?
Correct.
Right, okay. Number 9, the consistency of the development with respect to setback area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping of the surrounding buildings and development. The planning board finds that the setbacks and placement of the new building and associated parking are consistent with the highway business zoning district. Further, the incorporation of vegetated drainage, swales, interior site landscaping, and solar-covered parking areas, and unique architectural design of the building will provide an innovative design for a redevelopment project on Route 10. 10, adequacy of the measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater, to minimize erosion and sedimentation, and to minimize changes in groundwater levels, increased runoff, and potential for flooding. Planning board finds that the project will be designed and maintained in accordance with the order of conditions and stormwater management permit issued by the Conservation Commission, ensuring the proper measures and actions will be taken to prevent erosion and runoff during and after construction. 11, adequacy of methods to ensure that the use will not constitute a nuisance by reason of unacceptable level of air or water pollution, excessive noise, or visually flagrant structures and accessories. The planning board finds that the overall use of the property as a supermarket is compatible with the other uses in the highway business zoning district. The project includes a consolidated area for commercial refuse storage and collection and loading and unloading of delivery vehicles. As offered by the applicant, the owner will request vendor deliveries to be from the Route 10 section of Lyman Street and not from Florence Road to reduce the potential nuisance from larger truck vehicle traffic over the full length of Lyman Street. Proposed conditions. 1, the size and general location of buildings shall be substantially in accordance with the site and architectural plans approved as part of this special permit, subject to the following. A, minor changes in the project involving minor utility or building orientation adjustments or minor adjustments to parking or other site details that do not affect the overall build-out or building envelope of the site may be approved administratively by the building commissioner. B, other changes to the site plan shall be reviewed by the planning board at a public meeting to determine if the changes are insubstantial or significant enough to require modification of the special permit. C, changes to the tenancy of the existing accessory food establishment, demolition, relocation, or abandonment of the existing accessory food establishment shall be submitted to the planning board for review. So I think what we want to do there is cross out tenancy. So changes to the, and then I guess demolition, relocation, or abandonment of the existing accessory food establishment.
Could also be enlarging
Or
or
footprint.
any change to the footprint.
Footprint or other structural changes, or
So it could be the changes to the use, size, location, or abandonment. And I think kind of covers the gamut.
Yeah,
That
okay.
Okay, so the use, size,
Of the
location,
existing
or
accessory food establishment.
abandonment
okay.
of the accessory food establishment, yep.
Prior to the issuance of a building permit for the solar elements of the project, a final plan of the ground-mounted carport canopy and other ground-mounted arrays shall be submitted for review and approval by the planning board at a public meeting. Final plans shall include the specific design and construction plans as outlined in section 7.3 and listed in the findings herein.
Do you want to say if pursued here?
Or
put it in as another condition 6 later or something like that?
well, we already put in above with the designs that it's not required that they go
Yeah.
forward with the, I don't think we need that to be a condition.
Okay.
3, prior to the issuance of a building permit for the project, the two properties shall be combined via an endorsed A&R plan. So what was the reasoning there, Jeff?
So the reasoning generally was that the site plan shows the building being built over a property line, which generally is not something that, in my past experience at least, in another town, would not have been allowed. Because you can't technically build over a property line, even if it's, unless the applicant can articulate the difference between common ownership. That's what the applicant wants to talk about.
It's all in common ownership, there's no reason we can't build over an internal property line in common ownership. I don't think we need an A&R plan. If anyone's gonna require an A&R plan, it's going to be the lenders, because the lenders are gonna be the ones that really don't want encroachments or any title defects or any flaws in that way. And so I think if we need one, the lenders will tell us that, but I've never done it this way before, done an A&R plan to consolidate lots in common ownership. It just.
Well, it's just, yeah, and so right now the existing building, the Fedor dealership building is on a separate parcel and is conforming. And there's a second parcel with the food establishment, which is also conforming. My experience tells me that for the city assessing purposes, for building permit purposes, that there are 2 lots that are in existence until the lot line is eliminated and combined.
Yeah.
So
Is there a reason you wouldn't want to do it? I mean, it's
Just, it's just.
It's another step to add to
another
your
step,
list.
Another expense. It's
Yeah.
just, it would-
There's actually 3 lots.
there are
Yeah,
3
there's-
lots.
Yeah, there's 3 lots.
Right.
So, it's not the biggest deal in the world, I just didn't understand lots of projects where
I mean,
it's property lines.
I would be comfortable with it coming out as a condition, but I think you should clarify with the building inspector his interpretation, how he's gonna issue your building permit or not.
If the building inspector requires it, we'll do it.
Right, that's,
I think
I'm fine with
So
that.
we'll leave
Okay,
it
so
up.
why don't we
I'm flagging it
put
as
in
an
a
issue.
condition,
Yeah.
why don't we put in a condition that if so required by the building inspector?
Right. How about-
I'm
The
actually
applicant.
less
If-
comfortable with that. I'm sorry. I think it's better to do the A&R and clean up the lot lines in advance,
Yeah.
because I think that later on down the line that could come back to confuse
Well,
things.
well,
I'd
I
much
know-
You'd
prefer-
rather do it.
I'd rather have.
I
it.
agree.
And it's not very hard to do.
It's not a big deal, we'll do it. I didn't understand it, it's fine, we'll do it.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not trying to add an
Okay, then
extra
no,
step.
no, no.
I just think that
It's cleaner that way.
All right, so then number 4 is where we start with the applicant through its managers. Will direct all vendors to enter and exit the property only from the section of Lyman Street closest to Route 10. Substantiated violations of the truck exclusion by vendors serving the subject property shall constitute a violation under section 12.5 of the zoning ordinance. So I personally am comfortable with removing
Me too.
that,
That should
the
not be on
second
there.
sentence. I think that it's certainly something we could do, and I think in certain cases it may be appropriate, but I don't know that we need it here, but I'm open to input from anyone else.
I agree.
And I am going to open this up to the public when we're done with this reading project.
So just a question about the applicant through its managers.
I think I think that we can change that to the language we've quoted before, just make an explicit condition, right? So the applicant, through signage on the loading dock, at the exit, and notices on their contracts and purchase orders to vendors, will direct all vendors to enter and exit. So new number 5, all construction shall comply with applicable state and federal regulations, including but not limited to Americans with Disabilities requirements. New number 6, the project shall be constructed and maintained in accordance with the Conservation Commission's order of conditions and stormwater permit issued on March 4th, 2019. Any other conditions that either planning department or?
Do we actually get the signs in there, or we're conditioning the signs for the loading dock, Lyman Street entrance?
We added that to the new number 4.
So it's
That was
added
the
in.
new
right?
number
And
four.
then did we talk about actually the specific sign language on there, or we're just the sign location?
Well, the language is that the applicant, through signage on the loading dock, at the exit onto
Yeah.
Lyman
Yeah.
Street, and the contracts and purchase orders, will direct all vendors to enter and exit the property only from the section of Lyman Street closest to Route 10. So I think
So it's all
it is
Tied to
on a
it.
plan which
Yep.
is incorporated in there, that's what
It
they
is.
have, but I think if they want to, that's the message they have to convey.
Okay.
And then we were gonna, you'd done the finding for solar, but you wanted to put a catch piece. Is that in number 2 to make sure that, about them being pursuing it or not?
Yes, I think we carved that out in the language we added where the plans are incorporated, where they can either, they have to comply with the plans, but they can also elect not to
'Cause
pursue
I remember
solar.
earlier in that, you said you wanted it in 2 places as a condition as well.
No.
So if you look at condition number 2, so with the other language, it's written in the decision that it will be optional, basically.
Right.
Condition number 2 could be slightly modified to say that prior to the issuance of a building permit for a solar element of the project,
Right.
a final plan shall be submitted. So I think we can just generalize the condition a little bit so that it's more.
Oh, you were talking about the condition carving it back out if it becomes commercial.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we do want to have that. The
Yeah.
language, so an additional condition, which I think we did quote, right? And we've already drafted that?
Yep.
Did you write that down? Okay.
Yep, I have that written down. I can read it if you want.
Anybody else before I open this up?
Nope.
No.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Really? Oh, there we go, all right. With a sleeping baby, no less. Just whisper into the microphone.
Good evening. Okay. I'm Emily Lane, Rory Carmichael. We live on Parsons Street. I wanted to express my gratitude. Thank you to the planning board for being so thorough and guarding the aesthetics and all the other wonderful environmental attributes that you pay so close attention to. In support of this project, I want to say I drive past the lot, which is currently a little bit of an eyesore, to get to the Northampton store all the time, and I am very much looking forward to going to the new store. Living so close to the location, I think might even improve my property value because it's such a nice store to be near, and I think it will be a great asset to the Easthampton community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, comments, questions, concerns?
Yeah.
All right, please, Jim.
I motion to approve the special permit for River Valley Co-op, 228 and 232 Northampton Street, with the conditions we discussed.
Make sure you second.
I'll second that.
All right, Harry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? All right. So I feel like I'm saying this all the time now, which is probably a good thing, but it's really nice to see applicants and abutters working together instead of just sort of trying to sandbag a project or just ignore abutters as an applicant and say we're plowing ahead. I think it's been great the way everyone's been working on this project, and I thank everyone involved. It makes it a million times easier for us, but it's also better for everyone to move on.
Congratulations and welcome to Easthampton.
Thank you, folks.
Yes, welcome.
All right, yeah, so we'll draft a decision and get it to you
Soon.
soon, because we're almost done with it already.
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
8 a.m.
That's a little too soon.
All right.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. We already did our new business.
We did.
We have no old business, no requests for opinions. So,
So, can I
Next
make a
meeting is,
motion?
oh. Our public comment is at the beginning of the meetings. Is it something you can put on the agenda for next time? I'm sorry, we can't.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion.
We
drop it to
can't
Jeff.
accept it. You can give it to
Can't
Jeff.
accept it.
You can give it to Jeff.
Give it to Jeff.
But you
I'm
can't talk about
sorry.
it. Get a great shirt, guy.
Oh, well,
Can I get a motion?
I'm gonna motion that we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in
I have
favor?
discussion before you vote? No, it's too
None.
late. I just
No
wanna know when the next
discussion.
meeting is, that's all I want.
It says it, April 2nd.
Is it April
April
2nd?
2nd.
All right, then I say aye.
All
It's
sa-
after April
All in
Fool's
favor?
Day.
Aye.
Aye.
second?
April
I did.
2nd.
Okay, thanks.
Oh.
Who seconded?
I second the second.
Second to
Second to second.
I gotta give you a telecom and a CP.